You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Avraham Kivlevitz, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Clear the aisles, the Projectionist, Semicha. Hi, I'm here with Kolakowski. Yitzchak, of course, is getting ready for a monster bash out of this year, Kenton, Ohio, not just the site of Pro Football Hall of Fame, but the monsters are coming out this weekend. Yitzchak's going to talk a little bit about a film that he wants to see, a film that he's hoping to see again, that he's seen many times. And he's going to be talking about that film coming up soon, a classic if there ever was one, I guess. I want to talk about a film that I did not know about, but I don't feel so bad because no less of a personage than Martin Scorsese himself said that he did not know about this film, although he was very much a rat of the movies. He would go and spend Saturday afternoons in the movies and spend many of his summer evenings, filling up on films. We talked about Bogdanovich, Spielberg, and Scorsese, and a lot of these young guys who really became, film geeks to the ultimate. Scorsese didn't discover this film until one night. It was showing on some late show, and he didn't even know about it, which is quite strange because it's 1945's film that is probably one of the most unique films of any era. It's called Leave Her to Heaven. It was directed by John M. Stahl, who was Yankiv Moshe Straczynski, who was the director of the original Imitation of Life and Magnificent Obsession, later remade in the 50s as soaps by Douglas Sirk. Straczynski, this was probably Straczynski's greatest film, and it has stars really a star turn, a Oscar-nominated performance by Gene Tierney, who we've talked about before. It's one of these films that most people have a hard time deciding what is it. And when Scorsese saw it, he was also mesmerized by it. He says in a YouTube clip that you can see that every time he sees it, it's a different movie. And he, of course, put his shoulders behind the restoration of this film. And restoration was important because this film was shot in Technicolor, and it was shot in beautiful location shots throughout California, New Mexico, Arizona, and it's one of the most beautiful looking films that you could probably hope to see. And it is, and its subject matter is so difficult to swallow and accept. As I said, Gene Tierney is the star, and she plays a woman who loves so much that she will do anything to keep her love. She loves in such an obsessive way that she is a monster in her love. That is the Gene Tierney role. She plays Ellen. The love interest in this film is Cornel Wilde. Cornel Wilde, a Jewish Hungarian actor, escapes me, his Yiddish numen escapes me at this point. But Cornel Wilde was someone that was good looking enough to be able to star in a number of Hollywood vehicles. I remember a film he made in the 60s that I once saw on the ABC Sunday Night Movie that haunted me for years afterward, which is called The Naked Prey, where he's being chased by African warriors, a white guy, and they are after him for the whole movie, and he's running around in a loincloth the whole time and barely has any dialogue. But he was in pretty good shape even in the 60s. And this film, he's quite young, and I can't say that he does any amount of acting, but he clearly is someone who is pained and perplexed. And initially, he is seduced totally and completely by this woman that he meets on the train. The film is told in flashback with a flashback device, which is really not that important. You get the sense in the beginning of the film that he's been in prison for some reason, and that he's going to go find someone, and you don't know who that is. And then the film begins in the flashback, and you sort of are anticipating that there is going to be a crime, there's something going to happen. Although you're told it's only 2 years in prison, so I guess he's not going to be a murderer, is he, for 2 years in prison? And yet, murder is definitely something that you know is going to rear its head. It takes a while for it to happen, but you can sense it coming. It turns out that this writer, played by Cornell Wilde, who writes some of these, I guess, pot boilers, or I guess this sort of like the Thomas Tyron or Margaret Mitchell of his time, or some, not the Stephen King, but someone who's written a number of popular books, is working on a book, and he's going out to New Mexico. It turns out that he's on the same train with Jean Tierney's character, and he's staring at her like any male would stare at someone as beautiful as Jean Tierney. And she, when she notices she's being stared at, returns the stare in a way that causes him to be extremely uncomfortable, because she stares at him with a power that he can't even muster. And she apologizes. And right away, the film shows you how weird it is when she says, "I'm sorry for staring at you, but you remind me so much of my father." And what happens is, it turns out, of course, like in all Hollywood coincidence, of course, this is based on a bestseller that was actually optioned as it was being written by the studio. But as usually these coincidences happen, it turns out they're going to the same place. It turns out that the writer and this beautiful woman and her mother and her stepsister cousin, so to speak, an adopted cousin who's sort of like a sister in a way, are being taken to the same beautiful New England mountain home, New Mexico, I'm sorry, mountain home, where he's supposed to stay to work on his book. But working on his book is the farthest thing from his mind when he realizes this woman is there, and she's there with the ashes of her dead father. And she's there to go out into some incredible canyon type space, to go out by horseback. And she, Jean Tierney, riding horseback in a somewhat of a tight sweater, is holding these ashes of her dad. And Cornell Wilde follows her and watches from afar as she spreads the ashes, because this was the place where she had so much beautiful, loving time with her father. It becomes clear that the mother who has accompanied them on this trip has never even been to New Mexico. And it's clear that there is a terrible relationship between Jean Tierney and, I think it was May Phillips, who plays the mother. Your typical, as we know, it's called the Electra complex, where the opposite of the Oedipal complex, that you basically love your mother to the point, you love your father to the point that you are going to kill or do whatever it is to banish your mother. And you see that there is hardly any sense of a relationship between them. And you also find out that the half sister, or the cousin who becomes a sister, played by Jeannie Crane, later to also become a leading lady in Hollywood, but more like a June Allison character. I mean, you have these two very attractive girls, but the film makes it clear that the more central one, the more predatory one, is the Jean Tierney, Jeannie and Jean, so to speak. And Jean Tierney is the sister who always wins. One of the themes in this film is that not only is there Electra, but also she's almost like these siren mermaids. She's an expert swimmer, and you see her swimming in a two-piece, actually, and shows you a little bit where Hollywood was going risque a little bit over here, in a two-piece where she is swimming in this beautiful sort of pool that this fellow has in New Mexico. And the fellow has some children. And you would think if you're swimming, you're just going to enjoy the swim. No. Ellen always wins. Ellen Brent always wins. She's not just a swimmer. She needs to win in everything. And this is what Cornell Wilde hears, that this is a woman that always wins, that she gets what she wants no matter what. He also hears that the adoption that occurs by Jeannie Crane was not by the father, but by the mother adopted her, because there was this weird relationship. And again, the film really pushes the Hays Code here about the relationship that she had with her father, to the point that the Jeannie Crane character, the character called Ruth, you can't get more of a pure character than Ruth, with a name like Ruth. Ruth becomes the daughter that she wants to have. She's not really a daughter, but she's the daughter that gets the love from this mother, who the mother can't obviously give it to to Gene Tierney's character because of the hatred that exists between them. Why Cornell Wilde doesn't run like hell from this like clearly dysfunctional family again is one of the things that again it wouldn't be a Hollywood melodrama if he would do the normal thing, but instead she pursues him obviously out of this obsession that in some strange way he reminds her of her father, and although she's engaged, she actually is wearing an engagement ring. And who is she engaged to? She's engaged to someone that haunts some of your favorite films, although I know you told me you don't really appreciate him much of as an actor. She's engaged to the very young Vincent Price, who in 1945 was still considered somewhat of a dashing, not a leading man, but definitely handsome enough to be a Lotharius villain sometimes. In this case, he is a up-and-coming fellow who's running for office, and when he discovers from a letter that she writes to him that she's no longer engaged to him, that she's throwing off her engagement ring, and she's going and she announces to a surprise to everyone that she's actually engaged to Cornell Wilde, the writer Richard Harland. And Richard, he takes her, Cornell takes her into a room and says, "Oh, this is what you want, right? Go, of course, don't you know? This is the way it always works." In most cases, she tells him that women ask the men to marry them. They just think that they're asking them. In other words, she's the ultimate plotter, and she's saying this is what all women do. And before he knows it, they are married in some sort of quick ceremony. But there's a catch. And the catch is that besides being a successful writer, and everybody seems to be stuffed with guilt over here. I mean, Hollywood loves, that there's this beautiful house in New Mexico, and of course the Brents have some beautiful seaside home somewhere near Cape Cod, and Harland has, I'm going to tell you in a minute, he has not only a house somewhere, but he also has a cottage on a beautiful back area in Maine. Well, here's the rub, that Harland comes with some baggage too. He has a brother who suffers from polio, who is being hospitalized or being cared for in Hollywood's favorite spot, Roosevelt's own Warm Springs, Georgia, which was where Roosevelt felt those springs could somehow help his polio. And of course, the March of Dimes was very much connected to Warm Springs. They would bring many polio victims there to recuperate there with the hope that somehow the effect of the power of that water would somehow help them. So he has a little brother. Richard's little brother is played by, again, Yitzhak, one of your favorite actors' brothers. We talked about Dwayne Hickman. Dwayne Hickman's older brother, Daryl, plays Danny Harlan. Of course, Daryl Hickman had been in a number of films as a child actor. Again, he's no Freddie Bartholomew based on last week, but he has quite a resume, quite a filmography. And in this film, I guess he plays about 13 or 14 years old, approximately. And in the beginning, of course, they actually move and they buy a cottage near his hospital. But then when the doctor in the hospital suggests that now that you live so close by, that instead of him staying in the hospital, he should live with the Harlans. So she, you can tell she doesn't want that to happen. Ellen does not want anything intruding on the love life that she has with her husband. But of course, immediately when the husband shows up, she lies in front of the doctor and says, "Oh, the doctor told us the most wonderful news." And then you already know something is going to happen. Yitzchak, whenever you introduce a crippled character, there's a reason. This was not the time of intersectionality. This wasn't the time of Hollywood like today, where we just want to have representation. Hollywood at that time, if there was a character who was Black, a character who was a Jew, a character who has polio, somehow that's going to weigh in some important way in the story. You already know that. That's sort of like Chekhov said, if you're going to have a gun in the first act, it better go off in the third act. And of course it does. because it turns out that although it would seem they are living some sort of bliss as they move back to the backwaters of Maine, in that wonderful back place where Cornell Wilde and Hickman, these two brothers, have been living, along with the guy who takes care of the place, the inimitable Chill Wills. It's like you have here you have the triumvirate of these Hollywood saw. I think it's Andy Devine, Slim Pickens, and Chill Wills, right? I think you have these three are sort of these three interchangeable Southern guys. They were in a lot of Western films, and other films as well. We talked, of course, about Slim Pickens and Dr. Strangelove, and Andy Devine, of course, in the Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Chill Wills, I don't know if he had as illustrious as a career, but somehow Chill Wills is in this film, and he's actually strumming a banjo as well. And he definitely does not sound like your typical Maine carekeeper. Don't even try to give him like one of these New England accents. But Chill Wills is there as well to be the good, stolid, honest, decent human being in the film, because everybody else is clearly there's something wrong with. Every single person. That's why this is really like a film noir in many ways, because it turns out that as they're living in this house, she would like this, and there's a real almost a semi-erotic moment where even though they're separate beds, she gets into she's wearing a negligee or a nightgown, and she enters the bed of her husband. They have separate beds, and you can hear the knock on the paper thin wall where the brother says, "Hey, you guys up? I hear you guys." And you can tell how frustrated she is, but not just frustrated to the point of let's put up some room dividers or something that could dull the noise here, but rather frustrated to the point that that she is not going to let his brother really hang around. And although they engage the brother Daryl Hickman, known as Danny in the film, somehow they are like brother and sister. She puts suntan lotion on him, and he goes out swimming, and they're practicing secretly that he's going to be able to swim 3/4 or maybe the whole lake. She takes him out into the boat with the boat and encourages him to go swimming, to push himself further than he ever has. And she is like in a sense talking to him, trying to give him one last chance when she says to him, my parents will take you to Boston, and you're going to be able to hang out and go to school, and you can live with my mother and my stepsister, and you can live in Boston or on Cape Cod. You're going to like it there. No, he says, I want to live with you guys. I want to be with you. So then she says, okay, I guess the only thing I can do is basically kill this guy. But she doesn't really kill him, actually. But as she's sitting there in beautiful Technicolor lake, wearing this incredibly virginal white bathrobe and dark glasses covering these intense eyes that Gene Tierney has, you can see Hickman get into the water, and she, of course, is pushing it even further and further away from the shore with encouragement. And there's no music at all. And this, again, is a wonderful, masterful decision by Straczynski to stop any sort of music. And you can just see yourself out on this boat, and you can hear Hickman's cries when he gets a cramp and he's gone out too far, and his appeal to Ellen to save him. And she, of course, is the most expert of swimmers. And she just sits in the boat and lets him drown. I would say, Yitzchak, that this is probably one of the most gruesome and really deaths of 40s Hollywood. I want to rank it together with Kiss of Death's Tommy Udo's Richard Widmark, taking the grandmother or the great aunt, whoever it was, Victor Mature, and taking the telephone cord and wrapping it around her and pushing her down a flight of stairs, which it was terrible to see. But there was something even more ugly, because you expect Richard Widmark to be this ugly psycho. That was his whole persona. Here you have beauty personified. You have this Aphrodite. You have this incredible mermaid-like person. And she is bad, very, very evil indeed, and evil because, but not like a Republic serial villain who's just saying, oh, I'm just evil, I'm Cruella, I'm just no, no. Like she feels that she is misunderstood. She feels that she of course she's going to get rid of Daddy because how much she loves his brother, and she doesn't want to share him because how much she wants to give. And it's clearly that at that point, Cornel Wilde, as Richard Harland, realizes that something's amiss. They move out of Maine, they go to Boston, and it's clear some sort of friendship or more is happening between him and the younger sister because he suspects that something's going on. He knows his wife was an expert swimmer. Doesn't ring true that somehow that he went out so far that she wasn't able to jump in the water early enough to save him. Something sounds wrong, fishy, so to speak. But they grow distant. And Jeannie Crane gives, in a very poignant moment, she gives her sister an idea that if you want him to love you again, why don't you give him something to love? Why don't you have a child? And here again, the film against Krasinski and his writers push this into an area that's so unusual for 1940s films. What happens is that, yes, she's going to get pregnant. They're going to have a baby, but she's going to hate herself for her pregnancy. She's going to hate how being pregnant misshapes her body, and how ugly she looks, that she's no longer this incredibly beautiful woman who can look so wonderful because of this devil that's growing inside of her, she says. And then when the doctor, played by Gene Lockhart, who's always great whenever he comes in, and I mentioned him playing a Dr. Yitzchak, of course, in The Sea Wolf, where he played the doctor who kills him, who kills him of suicide. Once again, I guess Gene Lockhart probably played a doctor in a lot of films. I don't know how many. But Gene Lockhart comes in playing the doctor and telling her, of course, that she needs to rest. Obviously, she's bleeding or something, and that in order to save this child, she needs to stay in bed, which means that her husband is going out shopping and enjoying himself with the stepsister or the sister, the Jeannie Crane. And it's there she conceives of her next murder. And again, in today's society of Roe v. Wade being overturned, here you have what's her option here, what she's going to do because she doesn't want to be sidelined. She dresses herself up in her most beautiful gown and preps herself. It's such a incredibly evil act. She's going to abort her child, but she gets herself as beautiful as possible in order to ready herself to fling herself down the stairs in order to do that, with sort of the idea that perhaps she slipped. And so this is murder number 2, so to speak. And why does she do this? Why is it that she is? Why has she killed this child? And they discover, of course, that it would have been a boy, and it could have been in a way using the metaphor from the Torah of Yibum. This could have been perhaps the child dead, his brother coming back, so to speak. This could have given him some sort of. What she needed was psychiatric help. She needed help. But because of her beauty and because of her intelligence, that she never was a Nebuch. Instead, she was this preening victor that everybody just sort of hated and felt uncomfortable with. So even though Jeannie Crane says, "I've tried to make you love me, but I can't. You can't love anything. You can only love yourself and love what you want." And she turns to her in Jean Crane. I'm sorry, Jean Tierney, and she turns to her and says, "Look, I'm hoping that you could do something for me." And of course, at that point, she realizes that she has nothing. She knows, and it's there. Tyrone Power overhears the conversation and confirms to him his suspicions about what's happening and what's going on. Um, and he tells her that he's going to leave her. There's no way they could live together anymore. And now that he knows, she admits that she basically let his brother die. And it's that point that the film takes the murdering aspect up even a greater notch. And this allows Vincent Price to finally have his hammy role in the third act of the film. What she conceives of is that, well, if she can't have him, she's not going to let Ruth have him. And Ruth actually just wants to go away and just leave this family completely. But in Ellen's mind, in Gene Turney's mind, what she's going to do is fashion her revenge. And what she's going to have is revenge from the grave. She's actually going to let herself be killed. She's actually going to plant arsenic in an salts bottle that she knows is going to be used at a picnic that's coming up. And she's going to let herself be poisoned and plant clues to indicate that she has been poisoned and killed. In fact, she writes a letter to Vincent Price, who is now a district attorney, who that she suspects that they are plotting against her to kill her. And she writes specifically, I want my body to be buried in a cemetery. But she tells, on her deathbed, she tells Cornell Wilde that she's actually wants to be cremated and her ashes to be spread together with her father's, where she spread her father's ashes. Now, she didn't write that in her will. She gave them that orally. So although the film doesn't take you back to New Mexico to see that, what it turns out is that it makes it seem as if there's a conspiracy between Cornell Wilde and Jeannie Crane to actually cover up the murder that they have been plotting. And that what they are actually doing is cremating her body so you wouldn't be able to find the arsenic that was in the salts that was found somehow on the dress of her sister inside a packet that she had planted. And again, as I said, Vincent Price has a fun time pursuing his prosecution, like Perry Mason's "Isn't it true?" or "Isn't it true?" and "You know why you were doing this." Jeannie Crane gets to faint under the intense persecution, where she admits that she's always loved her brother-in-law. And it's only Cornell Wilde taking the stand and saying, I'm going to tell you what it was, that that this was a plot to reach from beyond the grave. And to actually, she was so vile and such a monster that she wanted from beyond the grave to have her control. And she'd be willing to bring everybody down the same way she had destroyed her mother. She's going to destroy her sister, destroy her husband, because that if something she can't have it, she's going to destroy it and control it. So that is, it really is a film that, it sounds so soap opera-ish, but it's done with such style, such panache, such a beautiful imagery. And it's really a shame, I guess, that Gene Tierney did not win the Oscar for this, because she really, I think, is able in ways that I don't think I ever saw her play a role better. Laura and some of the other films that we've talked about that she's made, I think this is really definitely her best role. Again, it's a film that overwhelms you with its beauty, and it also really shocks you and makes you think that maybe villain, yes, to the nth degree, yes, but perhaps that villain didn't have to become a villain. Perhaps there would have been a way that if that person, people would have treated her differently. It's possible that this type of psychosis would not have reared its head in such a way. Again, I don't know what pharmacology could have done at that time, but it's clear that the attitudes of everyone around this incredibly powerful person did nothing, Yitzchak, to help her at all. And it's almost like as a animal of prey cannot really change. This is what she has to be. And that way, it's sort of like an interesting contemplation about the nature of evil and why people do such terrible things, which I think is a good segue, it's like, for your film, where we also have someone who feels himself terribly wronged by his employers and decides the ultimate vengeful plot of what he's going to do, right? It's Bela Lugosi in Jean Yarbrough's 1940 classic.
Movie that I've seen many, many, many times called The Devil Bat, which is it's also known as Killer Bats, which I always thought was a better title personally, as a younger person, because I think it was more of a science fiction type of a title. But in any event, this is a very cheap, rather short movie. It's good for people like me with a short attention span, where you have this story of this character, Dr. Paul Carruthers, which doesn't sound like the type of name that you would expect a Hungarian, someone with a Hungarian accent. He must have changed the name at Ellis Island or something. And he's the local doctor of a town called Heathville, which is named after this family, the Heath family, that hired Dr. Carruthers to help them form all kinds of colognes and aftershaves and other things that are perfumes and things. And the film opens up with Bela Lugosi in his laboratory, with all of these beakers and Bunsen burners and things going on, and then he opens a fake door, and behind there he has, in some kind of a big closet, he has another fake door, and then you find that he is using some kind of electrical apparatus to take regular sized bats and turn them into giant bats. And in the faraway shots, you see a rubber kind of a bat, and then the close-up shots, they actually show a flying fox, a big fruit bat, which is an actual bat that's actually the size of what is being presented in the film. They're actually bats with 6-foot long wingspan. Now, none of them are dangerous.
What is the scientific advantage or the commercial advantage of growing larger bats? What's the idea that
I think it's just because it makes the movie seem interesting, really. Lugosi plays a mad scientist, obviously, which he played much more than he ever played Dracula on film, or any type of vampire for that matter. He very, very rarely played Dracula or any vampire on film. So he's quite often played this mad scientist character, and quite often he would be doing something that seems totally nonsensical.
But he's working for a company, right? He's not just a mad scientist that has his own crazy lab. He's actually working for some sort of big conglomerate, right?
Yeah, but it's a secret that he's making these bats into giants, and also he discovered that some chemical that he found drives the bats crazy. And it's just, I always enjoyed this scene, where he has these goggles on and he's looking through the window and with this like evil smile, watching the bats being made into giants, with this apparatus. And but it's a secret. There is no pharmaceutical or commercial benefit in making giant bats, but rather he's out to take revenge on those that he feels that have wronged him.
Right. And how do they wrong him? How was he wrong? Tell me what, again. I gave you the motivation of my villain. Tell me again, this is a villain show. Why in the plot does he feel he needs to take revenge? Why does he feel he was wrong?
Things that I see working in the prison, where so many bad criminals see themselves as the victims, and here's a man who is being supported by the Heath family to do their bit, to work for them, and they pay his bills, they support him, they keep him in this humongous laboratory that they're all paying for, and they give him this check to show their appreciation for all the help that he's done. And he feels that all of that is his money. It's almost like a communist type of ideology that he feels, him as the worker, as opposed to the investor who's taking the risk to lose
Okay.
everything.
So the Heath Company, what he has developed for them is an aftershave lotion, right? That's what he did.
He's developed all kinds of colognes and perfumes over the years, and that's how they became very, very wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And but in order to take his revenge, he tries to have each of them put on this aftershave lotion. And when he lets the bats loose, they're attracted to it and they attack whoever is wearing this cologne, this aftershave.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
And the aftershave is very, I guess, it's such a great smelling, feeling aftershave that everybody is wearing it, and anybody who's wearing it is going to be attacked somehow by these bats that he has created that have been.
he gives it only to the people that he specifically wants to victimize. He hasn't
Mm-hmm.
released it yet. He's saying that this is something that is being offered as that he's trying to work on, and he's trying to see how people enjoy it or not, and if they like it. And so they're all trying it. All the members of the Heath family are all trying it. But the Heath family call him. They invite him. They want to give him this check. They want to show their appreciation, and he's offended by how dare they give him this pittance when they made all this money off of his back, and he's not
So we also have to, of course, mention that like all of these films, no matter what they are, The Devil Bat, it's not really a horror film unless there's some woman who is under attack. And here we have the Heath heiress, right, played by that wonderful actress Susan Karen.
yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm not sure exactly. A Brooklynite. I'm not sure if she was Jewish or not. But she was one of the original Rockettes. So I guess she looked good enough to be able to right to be able to be at least act that part. Right? I'm sure she doesn't have to do much acting in this film, did she?
No, not quite. No, but there's a character, Dave, played by Dave O'Brien and Donald Kerr. They're kind of the good guys in the film, and they're the protagonists, and they're kind of comic relief. They're trying to be somewhat of a poor man's Abbott and Costello, and the director Gene Yarbrough directed Abbott and Costello on 5 occasions, and also directed Bowery Boys on 5 occasions. So there's a lot of attempted comic relief. They're not particularly funny. It's the same type of thing that I mentioned, that there was a movie, The Ape Man, that makes even less sense than this movie. But it's one of the strange movies that were made by this one of these poverty row.
All right, so Yitzchak, we know that as we said before in our film, the evil person never gets away with it. We know that that Carruthers will not get away with it, but he is gonna. There are going to be a couple people that are going to be killed by the bats before it's discovered that he's the guy behind it, right?
Exactly, yeah, and then the newspaper reporter, he throws some of at the end of the movie. I mean, it's obvious that that's what's going to happen in the end. He throws some of this aftershave on Lugosi, and the bat kills him, and that's the end of that. So
it's interesting, this movie, which you said is in the public domain, and everybody has it on some sort of cheapo DVD that they bought. You told me this before we started recording. I noticed when I look did a little, not much research here, but 5 years later, there was the Devil Bat's daughter. I'm not sure if somehow they got a hold of Lugosi, of Carruthers' original way to create these Devil Bats, but it looks like Hollywood felt, hey, let's bring it back again.
Lugosi is not in that movie, and
he's dead. He has to, right? He has to.
Yeah. So it's more of a psychological thriller, but it kind of upslugs the whole first movie. It really makes Carruthers into a good guy.
Oh, the Devil Bat's daughter.
Yeah. I think I've only watched it once. I know I have it on DVD, but there's a similar film which George Zucco played the mad scientist, called The Flying Serpent, which is a very similar type of a story. apparently in 2015, someone made an indie film called Revenge of the Devil
Yeah,
Bat.
actually, according to this 2020, actually, 2020 they made Revenge of the Devil Bat, which is a sequel to, yeah. So it sounds like this film has gotten more of a life than Leave It to Heaven. You know,
Yeah, I've never heard of Leave It to Heaven, but I grew up watching Devil Bat since I'm a kid. I see here on the Wikipedia page they mentioned one of the main stays at Monster Bash is Tom Weaver, who writes a lot of books and things, and he says that in the book that he wrote called Poverty Row Horrors that he thinks this was really the best of Lugosi's Poverty Row films, which I think Invisible Ghost a lot of people think may have been somewhat better, but I think
and,
this
and,
is
and I think Straczynski, who we mentioned before, John M. Stahl, was I think one of the main producers and directors of the Poverty Row. So I'm sure Yarbrough and Stahl knew each other. You know, they were sort of like, again, everything in Hollywood is sort of like incestuous in this way. They all probably borrowed and took from each other. And it's strange. Again, Akol Toli B'Mazel, right? I feel safer
yeah.
Somehow this film, like with its, as you said, you know, sort of like the rubber bats and you know, hokey type of camera work, and here, you know, the lavish, beautiful Technicolor stuff that's in Leave It to Heaven is somehow, you know, nobody even knows about it. And yet the Devil Bat, you know, the Devil Bat is probably going to be seen by more people and applauded by more people than what's, you know, I would say is, you know, a real psychological film noir masterpiece. Leave Her to Heaven. By the way, Leave Her to Heaven again, I should mention again, is based on a quote from Hamlet, where they're talking about revenge against the queen, and Hamlet is told, "Leave her to heaven," and heaven itself will wreak their own revenge on these people as the thorns that somehow will attack in her in a bosom. So this is somehow the idea that there's certain people you just have to let fate, let Shamayim take care of in terms of what they're going to do. And again, there's nothing like a great villain. We know that, and without villains, there are no films. Right? You know, films about good guys. Just about, you know, generally, and again, this is part of the problem with the Batman franchise. You know, the fact that Heath Ledger's Joker was, you know, was a lot, meant a lot more to people than Christian Bale's Batman. Nicholson's Joker was, you know, outshined Michael Keaton's Batman as well. And this is really, films really do not have a dramatic power and a moral type of direction unless there is someone who we see going wrong that we can say, no, don't be like that. What is wrong with that? And even the gangster films of the 30s, these incredible characters, whether they were played by George Raft or played by Paul Muni or Edward G. Robinson or Cagney, we are drawn to them by what makes them so salacious, what makes them so mendacious, what makes them so plotting, and we see elements of ourselves in them. I'm not sure, and like you say, there are in many ways the Heath Company has been, although they took care of him, perhaps they didn't give him enough covet, they didn't give him enough fame, and etc. And perhaps again, I don't know if the Devil Bat deserves this type of discussion, but maybe one should wonder, had someone, you know, somehow stopped him before he decided to go on to his plot, his nefarious revenge. Maybe this was someone whose wisdom and understanding, like all mad scientists, could somehow be used for something positive. You know,
I mean,
like,
and these are the type of things that I see in real life. You know, working with prisoners, seeing the talents that they have, and that they use so much for bad. You know, for you know that if they would have just used all of their intelligence for something positive, something productive, they wouldn't be in the mess that they're in.
but it really, as I said in my summary of Leave Her to Heaven, it's the people around the villains that could really change things. And I didn't see the Joaquin Phoenix film The Joker, but I know it's based on the Alan Moore's the Batman classic comic called The Killing Joke, where it seems, again, there's a reason why the Joker becomes the Joker. There are factors. It isn't just like the Nochosh, the Satan. I think Hollywood really wants us to look in the mirror a little bit and own up to the devils that are around us. Again, it's always easy to throw popcorn at the villain and say boo. And I think films that expect more of us want us to contemplate why people become the way they are. And maybe in some ways we're responsible for not confronting them, for not trying to stop them in their tracks, for not trying to talk to them, for not doing stuff, for not bringing in people that could perhaps have changed things. Obviously, it makes for great drama and for great cinematography and for great action scenes when they do get out of hand and we do have to chase them and they are bringing us to court and they are plotting with their schemes. That's what makes it the excitement. But I think that as we walk out of the theater, maybe we should realize that these villains among us, we're in a way all to blame. And we all know that when it comes, again, getting rabbinic here for a minute, we all know that there was only 3,000 people who committed the Chet HaEgel in actuality, yet everyone in Klal Yisrael, in some ways, bears responsibility for how they could have acted in a way that they could have stopped this from happening. Whether they were happy in it happening, whether they didn't do enough, they could have gotten involved. And I think we as rabbis and as Jews realize that type of community. Yeah, we can enjoy the film, but we can also perhaps take it to heart to somehow get some lessons of our responsibility to support people before they devolve into these types. And look, this is in that way, I guess that once again we could say, yeah, watch your step, my friends, on the way out. We'll catch you next time. Take care, my friends. Be well.
Thanks for joining us for another episode from the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.